Welcome to the Homeschool Lounge. We are further exploring liberty in learning, and my guests are Zakiyya Ismail and Je'anne L Clements. We're going to speak about education and the definition for it, especially since the South African Constitution states that all have the right to a basic education, but we have no statutory definition, which means we have to turn elsewhere. Now, you are both activists for self-directed education. How do you define education? Zakiyya, will you go first?
Okay, sure. Hi. So the first thing I would say is it's not schooling. There's a difference between schooling and education. One can use a system of schooling in order to get an education or not. One can also go to school and not get an education. So to me, it's the learning journey of each individual person that enables them to participate meaningfully in the community or society they find themselves in. And if we look at our modern Western societies that many of us find ourselves in, that would be basic literacy, negotiating our emotions, communication, and because we live in a society that's quite oppressive to children, I think one of the things that of a basic education would be for young people to understand that and to normalize this idea, for them to normalize and internalize the idea that they are human beings, that they have a right to their feelings, to their thoughts, to their interests, and that they have to be, coerced into following a prescribed path set out by either parents or by the government.
Je'anne, how would you define education?
Basic education specifically, I think, has got a couple of different components that people don't usually think about. I think too often we think basic education means being able to read, write, and do maths. Whereas essentially it's everything you need in order to be able to live effectively. I like what Zakiyya said about being able to participate in your community and your world. But from that perspective, I'd say firstly, as a child in your world now, and once you are an adult in the world that you're an adult. And I think we often lose sight of that children actually need to be able to participate in their worlds right now. And that's part of what the education needs to give them, is that ability. Then secondly, I think that basic education was always intended to help you have options and be able to escape your origins if you wanted to, so that you wouldn't be a kind of a prisoner of circumstance. And that's, I think, where we got to the thinking that it's all about reading, writing, and maths, because 100 years ago, it was the people who had the reading, writing, and maths who would be able to have choices in life. Whereas now, we are living in a world where there is voice to text and text to voice, calculators in everybody's pocket on a cell phone, basic education that enables you to escape your origins now has got a lot more to do with the things that Zakiyya was saying, your ability to manage yourself emotionally, your social skills, your creativity, your ability to self-direct effectively. So I think that's something we really need to keep an eye on, is that those definitions of basic education, firstly, are changing historically, and secondly, are going to differ completely from person to person. And this is where self-directed education really comes in. Because a basic education for somebody whose destiny, if you like, is going to be an Olympic gymnast is a very, very different basic education. They need to know how to do the splits. They need to have a certain level of flexibility. So we've got to take into account that incredible individuality when we talk about basic education in SDE, is that nobody can define it for anybody else.
Yes, as you also said, the child is involved in it, and each child is unique with their own talents, their own likes and dislikes. We need to allow them the opportunity to develop. So how do you see the role of the parent and the role of the government in providing an education to the children of South Africa? Je'anne, if you'd maybe like to continue.
Well, I think parents are the helpers. children in our world don't really have much embodiment of their rights. They don't have freedom of movement. Kids can't just wander around, unfortunately, in most communities, speaking to whom they want to and finding out what they want to find. So parents are often the people who have gates to open or close. So I think that the SDE parent really needs to be somebody who is available and willing to help the child want to access. And I think that that goes for the government as well, because obviously not all parents are going to be able to manage that. And from my perspective, that's really where the government comes in. I think that the government really needs to have a role when the family managing fine and the child is getting the access to everything that they're needing for their personal development. But the government definitely does need to be there as the safety net for those children who need more than their parents can manage. And I think that that's their responsibility and their obligation. But I think we often lose sight of the fact that it's the child's education and that they're in charge of it first, and that the government and the parents are assisting, not directing in our world, in our ideal.
Yeah, Zakiyya, your children are almost grown up, if they are not all grown up. How did they fulfill their role in their own education, and how did you allow them to do that?
So we just lived together, and for us, we participated in life, and the learning was the byproduct of living. And when I say that, I mean that they spent their time doing things that they were interested in. For instance, gaming, or story writing, or tennis, or that's all I can think of right now. Whatever their interests were, my role was to partner with them as far as I could, and to also introduce things to them that they might not come across just because of our circumstances where we are. So travel, it was really, we just lived life. I didn't see myself as somebody who was there to direct them into how they spent their time. Although I must say I did spend quite a bit of time in terms of interrogating our current society, and that's something, I don't know how they feel about it. But I thought that we live in a very deeply oppressive, unequal society. And I felt that if that's not something I wanted them to learn as a byproduct of living, because they would pick up a lot of unconscious biases in terms of patriarchy, racism, etc. So those are things we tackled head on. And it was also integrated into life. So I didn't restrict any TV watching, but we had engaged conversations about what was it coming through, what are the standards of beauty, what food wastage, what kinds of values that came through. So I think I would say a lot of it was one very, very large conversation.
What I hear from both you and Je'anne is that it's very much about teaching a child life skills, because we function in a different society than 100 years ago. Like you said, in defining education, it is what we want out of education. And these days, with the leaps and bounds we experience in technology, it is probably more important to teach your child how to interact than how to read and write. Would you agree with that statement?
I think they're all essential tools. I think, but they're all tools. And like any tool, it can be used for liberation or for oppression. So reading historically was used to test people, to dispossess them from lands, etc. And people need to learn how to read in order to liberate themselves from that. But I think it's more than, it's actually not teaching our children. It's about reflecting what we want them to live in our own lives. So for us, it's not so much of modeling. It's not like I can say, well, it's important that you play outside because sun is healthy for you, etc. I had to live that and say, the sun is important, being outside is important, so I'm going to spend a lot of time outside. And so rather than teaching, I would rather go and say as self-directed education or unschooling families, we model that kind of, and we try to create kind of systems that we think we want to see in the world, which is kind of different from teaching. So we don't have like lessons on kindness, for instance. It's just about treating people with kindness, if that makes any sense.
Yes, that's one of the benefits I see in home education, is that we get to model behavior.
Yeah.
It is not just a worksheet we put in front of our kids and say, this is, what is expected of you. We actually get to model how to handle conflict, how to show respect. Yes. Zakiyya, you also run a conference or workshop, Learning Reimagined, where you want to address how we view education. So would you say a one-size-fits-all approach for education is ideal?
Oh, no. I think then once we agree on that, then we'll agree that one meal, there's the ideal meal for every person as well. No, I think we all individuals, and we have different tendencies, different values, different inclinations, interests. So this whole one-size education would mean monoculture of the mind. And that is the most dangerous thing for any country, because then we cut off all the innovation and creativity that could be gifted to us by citizens. And that the one size then would not fit most people. So we have most people being suppressed, coming out with mental health issues, not believing in themselves, not having had the opportunity to explore what their gifts were. And that would be a loss for each individual and each community. And it would be a huge loss for our country, given that we have so many hugely talented people here.
Je'anne, do you want to add something? And could you maybe just briefly explain what self-directed education is? We've mentioned the word, but we haven't really spoken about the concept.
So self-directed education is education that happens completely at the choice of the person who's getting the education. They're completely in charge of their own time. And a lot of what they learn isn't learned on purpose. It comes from, as Zakiyya said earlier, from life, living life, and learning what happens. So different individuals may or may not choose to also take on intentional learning experiences. But the sum total in the end is that we all naturally discover what it is that we need to know, and we find a way to learn it. So for example, when you get a new cell phone, you go through a self-directed learning experience, or most of us do. I don't know, somebody might go to how to tackle your upgrade class, perhaps. I haven't come across that. But we're all doing self-directed education all of the time, and we just don't notice it. And that's also where it does need to be so individualized, because imagine if all of us had to take a class in Samsung and the iPhone and the carry on listing, and then go and get our upgrade and start trying to apply what we've learned. That's what we're really looking at when we're looking at a curriculum-based one-size-fits-all education, is that everybody is basically learning 99% of stuff that they will never use and don't need to know. And the big problem with that is it's preventing them from having the time and the effort and the energy left to learn the 99% of what they uniquely needed. And that's why, we've got so much misery in people's lives. Very few people feel fulfilled and passionate about what they're doing and are really living their lives to the full, because they've learned not to pursue that, and they haven't gotten that sort of early edge by being able to pursue that while young. If you look, we keep hearing the same story again and again. So many people who are really the top of their game is that had that extra opportunity to pursue their passion while young. And that's really what SDE is all about.